Hi there, my name is Rachel White. I am a JFK assassination researcher, and in this video I really wanted to kind of remake a video that I did much earlier and just clarify a few more points, bring some things together, and to just keep us like updated and fresh really in where we are at with our research. So in this video I really want to talk about Wesley Frazier, Lee Oswald, Ruth Payne, and what was happening on the night before the assassination, Thursday the 21st, around this whole Irving connection. And I want to just start by telling us what we have been told the narrative has always been. And that is to say that, you know, in every mainstream program and every Tracking Oswald program, everything that's ever come out about anything, we've always been told that Lee Harvey Oswald woke up on that Friday morning, left his ring in a cup in a dresser, walked out of the Ruth Payne house, went into the garage, picked up a package in brown paper packaging and took it down the road a piece, two or three doors down to the house of Wesley Frazier, who he was working with in the Texas School Book Depository, and they were riding in together. Linnie Mae Randall, his sister, saw Lee out of the kitchen window placing a package into the back seat of Wesley's 1954 black Chevy, and off they go together. And when they get to the Texas School Book Depository, Frazier parks his car a little further distance away from the main car park entrance to the back end of the school book depository, and Lee gets out of the car, holds the 27-inch brown paper packaging up under his arm, so it's upwards now, and walks into the building on his own while Frazier is fiddling around in the car, tuning it up and messing about with the engine, whatever it is he's doing, watching the rail yard switching. And that is the story that Frazier has told, and that is the story that everybody for all time understands to be the sequence of events as to how Lee got from his residence, Ruth Payne's house in Irving, to the Texas School Book Depository on the morning of the assassination. So I want to come and I want to bring some other factors in, some things that we've discovered which indicate to us that that story that we have been told cannot possibly be now the truth. Okay, so I want to start by explaining what Lee was doing in Irving on the Thursday night. Now, the Thursday night, the 21st, ahead of the assassination, we know that Lee came back to Irving with, picked a ride with Wesley Frazier, and they came back together. Came back, he went into his home to see Marina and the children, the new baby, had a meal. Okay, now from our research, we understand now that Lee, yes, he went back on the Thursday night, but he actually left again at around about 8:45 in the evening. And we've pieced this together through various sources and various bits of information that have come to us from different angles. And when we put those things together, we're able to see a fuller picture. And that's really what we've done here. Because we've got to remember that the account of Lee Harvey Oswald coming into the building with a brown paper package and having a conversation about its curtain rods, and putting that package on the back seat of Frazier's Chevy, and all of that has only ever come from Wesley Frazier himself. That account of Lee and Frazier riding in has come solely from Frazier. Okay, nobody else except Linnie Mae, his sister, and the mother that was living in the home at the time, is corroborating that Lee and Wesley rode in together. And there are reasons, and I've covered that in another video, as to why this family have told us the story this way. But I believe it not to be true. And I believe it to be true. And I'm going to explain to you why I believe that is the case. So if you've been following our research, you will know some of these points already, but I'm going to reiterate them. During the Thursday night, early hours on the Thursday night, we found a document of a witness called Mary Lawrence, who was a waitress in Lucas B&B diner, all-night diner, who was hushed to silence because she claims that she saw Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby at 2:30 a.m. Having a quiet coffee head-to-head conversation in this diner in the middle of the night together. So she was never called by the Warren Commission, unsurprisingly, because they were very, very much of the we cannot have any testimony that links Ruby and Oswald together. So for somebody to come along and say they've seen these two individuals together, it's significant hours before the events have unfolded in Dallas. That's very, very significant. She was threatened. And in this case, we have got to take all of the information that's coming out from people that were discounted by the Warren Commission and give them the weight that they deserve, because they were dismissed by the Warren Commission. But that does not mean that their testimony is any the less valid. What we have to do is we have to look at everybody's account with equal weight and then work out where the truth is and where the lies are by how it corroborates together. So Mary Lawrence is seeing these two in an all-night diner. Now, here is the question. Here is the question. How does Lee Harvey Oswald get from Irving in the middle of the night, which is 12 miles away, to meet with Jack Ruby at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the night, and drive all the way back 12 miles to Irving, simply to get up 7 a.m. to walk 3 houses down the road to hitch a ride with Frazier? That does not make sense. Because if he has transport, why would he need a lift in? And if he is meeting Ruby in the middle of the night, what would be the need to go back to a household to do what? To do what? He's not said any goodbyes to his family. What would be the purpose of him to go back for a couple of hours? There's no reason to do so. Furthermore, in the 1980s, they did a mock trial of Oswald. It was televised, and this is all on YouTube, so you can go and review this in your own time. But they did a mock trial of Oswald, and Jerry Spence, the counsel there, got Ruth Payne on the stand and asked her some very pertinent questions. And when I've reviewed that, it's come to light that she was talking about the night before. And Jerry Spence is leading her questioning and asking her about different things to do with Oswald leaving the property. And when we review that, we can see very clearly that Ruth cannot tell us categorically that she saw Lee before she woke up. You know, she got up in the morning of the Friday. She cannot tell us that she saw Lee at that point. By the time her day began, she became aware that Lee Harvey Oswald had already left the property. Well, how does she know then that he left at 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning, whatever time, 9 o'clock the night before? if she didn't actually see him. Do you see what I mean? So she's only in this position where she assumes that this is what's happened. Now, the night before, it's very apparent to me that Ruth Payne, when she's on the stand, this is 20 plus years later, is very, very annoyed and irritated still that at 9 o'clock in the evening, when she went down to the garage there, she noticed that the light had been left on. So they'd had a meal together. They'd done the chores and, tiny children. They got their children to bed. Ruth Payne used that garage. It was full of stuff that she was using, a saw and building block material and wood and paint and varnish, because she made great big toy boxes for children to put their toys in and these kinds of things, and painted them up. So she'd gone down to the garage around 9 o'clock to complete some of this work, and she notices that the light had been left on. And she clearly tells us that she did not believe the light to have been left on by Marina. And she knew that obviously she wouldn't have done that herself. So she now, the only other person who has been in that home is Lee. So it's clear that Lee has been in the garage now, and Lee has left the light on. Now, you would think that if you are that irritated and that annoyed by a light being left on, and you can remember that 23 years later to bring up as a point, that is a significant emotional trigger point for this lady. So if you're that annoyed 23 years later, you're going to be very, very annoyed at the moment in which it happened. So my contention is, if you've got somebody that is that cross about something that's happening in their house because a guest has overstepped the mark, and especially when you're paying the bill because the light's been left on, you're not going to let that lie. You're not going to let that lie. You're gonna go in there and you're gonna knock on the door and you're gonna find the person and you're gonna accost them and say, "Hey, I thought I told you don't leave the lights on in my house. Oh, why have you switched the light? Why haven't you switched the light off?" You're gonna do something about it because you need to resolve the situation. And it's clear to me, it's super obvious to me, Ruth never got closure about this stupid light being left on, and it was still an issue to her emotionally 23 years later. So because she hadn't dealt with it, because Lee was not there. Lee had left the property at this point by 9 o'clock. So just prior to 9 o'clock, of course, what we are saying is that Lee was in the garage prior to 9 o'clock. Now, let's think about this light. Why would Lee leave the light on? Well, the answer actually, when you think about it logically, is very, very interesting and obvious to work out. The Warren Commission did some tests and some investigation into that garage because, Ruth and Marina later told the police that the weapon had come out of that garage. So they're going to look at this garage very carefully. Now, in the garage, of course, and you know this from your own garage and your own utility room, when you are in the house end of your house and you open the door to your garage and your utility room, think about where the light switch is. It's literally just there, isn't it? It'll be within your arm, somewhere on the wall here or behind the door. The light switch is within your arm's length. And that's a deliberate design, because you're not going to want to walk across half a cold room full of junk to put your own light on. You just literally want to reach around the door and switch it on so you can see where you're going, what you're doing. So Lee has gone in the garage, and of course, and he's left very, very quietly. But he's left through the up and over door, which is at the other end of this garage. Of course, it's at the other end of this garage. So if you're going to leave that way, you can't then come back through all of the junk and switch the light off to walk back through all of the junk that you now can't see and stumble across it, because it's, you know, you can't navigate a path in the darkness. So he had no choice. If he was going to leave that way, which I believe that he did, he had no choice. He had to leave the light on. Okay, so this is our pointer to say that Lee was in the garage on the Thursday night, and Lee left that property through the up and over door of the garage. Now, we've seen some pictures of Ruth Payne's garage. It's absolutely jam-packed full of junk stuff. You couldn't move through there. So what was Lee doing in the garage? Well, Lee we believe was collecting a couple of items, and the reason that he went back to Irving on the Thursday night was because he needed a couple of items. Now, if you've been following any of our research and read our books, you will know that we now have worked out that Lee was going to make an escape dressed as a policeman, and he was going to go to Redbird to make his escape, and Tippett was actually going to collect him. So if you're going to dress as a policeman, you need to have on a police uniform. Now, there was a police uniform hanging in the back of Tippett's car, and we believe that was designated for Lee to wear. But the trousers, he probably had on his jean trousers, his work trousers, and he needed smart black trousers. So he went back to Irving because the smart black trousers were hanging up, probably in Marina's closet. So in his bedroom, you see, at in Dallas at 1026 North Beckley, that room is the size, you know, not even the size probably of a prison cell. It's a bed and a chest of drawers. You're only going to have what you absolutely need to have in there. He would have not needed smart black trousers for his everyday work. So he's got his everyday work clothes and a few bits, and really that would have been it. But Lee now is planning on making an escape, so he needs specific items. He needs a black bag to put some handy essentials in, which he probably had somewhere in his stuff, in his marine duffel bags, and these smart black trousers. So this is what we feel now that he's gone back to Irving to collect. Okay, now it's incredible. It's incredible. We found that we've got a document on our page, Oswald was not a shooter, to say that Clay Shaw owned and was in possession of a Nash Rambler, and we feel that Nash Rambler was supplied to the Paynes for the specific use of Lee Oswald whilst he was there. So he had transportation. Now, it is my belief that Lee took that car and drove that car away from Ruth Payne's house on the Thursday night. We can't quite piece together exactly what he did next, but we know for sure that he was in that diner in Dallas speaking with Ruby in the middle of the night. That Nash Rambler, of course, you'll remember, turns up later on as a vehicle that Roger Craig sees Oswald rushing down the knoll and entering into moments after the assassination. And of course, if you think that through, Oswald is recognising the vehicle that's going to come and collect him, because he is the one that has been driving about in it. Now, Ruth Payne is not going to think anything of him taking this vehicle necessarily, because she's the one who's been giving him driving lessons. He didn't need driving lessons. He could already drive. Don't let's get into that. He could already drive, but she's not going to think anything of it particularly, because he'd already learnt to drive, and he was learning to drive with her. So he takes this vehicle away. So that then means that he has got transportation, okay? But he did not drive back in that car, okay, to just dump it and then hitch a ride with Frazier. That didn't happen. That just did not happen that way. So let's now think about the Friday morning. On the Friday morning, we've been told Lee is fiddling around, collecting a package from the garage and taking it down to Frazier's, putting it on the back seat of the Chevy. Right. Now, when the police turn up at Ruth Payne's later on in the afternoon, Marina and Ruth are in the garage and they are noticing a baby's blanket, right, discarded. And they kind of hook it up and it's limp. And Marina, through Ruth's interpretation, is telling the police there that this is the blanket in which Lee had stowed a gun. Now, we've got a big problem with that because Marina could not speak any English whatsoever, okay? Maybe the odd pidgin word. So at this point, when this conversation is occurring, we've got to think about this. When this conversation is occurring and the police officers are asking Ruth the questions and Ruth is interpreting it for Marina and Marina is responding back and Ruth is interpreting it for the police, right? Ruth could actually be asking any question and giving any answer. Because Ruth is the filter for this conversation, we have no way of knowing that Ruth is having the same conversation or asking the same questions that the police are asking. No way of knowing at all. And for all we know, we could be working at cross purposes with that one. Okay? So Ruth is intimating that the rifle, a rifle, has come out of this baby's blanket. Now we have a huge problem with that account. And here is why. Here is why. Because Frazier testifies that Oswald brings a package 27 inches long like this, okay? And it's wrapped in brown paper packaging. Now, the gun, okay, is not 27 inches, 27 inches long. It's not that big when it's fully assembled, and it's not that big when it's not fully assembled. So here's what we need to think about. Who would go into a garage and take a gun out of a blanket wrapping, dismantle it piece by piece, and place it then into a brown paper packaging, which is less substantial, right? Wrap it back up again and take it out the garage? Who would do that? Or who would have a gun stowed in a garage, in a brown paper packaging, in a baby's blanket, two layers, and take the outer wrapping off, discard that, and take the package away? You wouldn't do that. If you had a weapon stowed in a garage and you wanted to take it out and you knew you were going to use it and you were going to take it and you were going to, you needed it and you needed it quick, you and I and every single person in the entire world would say, that's the package I want, and take the whole thing. The whole thing. You would take the entire package. You would worry about unwrapping it a bit later, because you've known ahead of time that that is the secure package. You don't have to fiddle around with it. It's ready to go. Boom, let's go. Let's take it. None of this unwrapping malarkey. You just would not do that. So logically, that does not make sense. Okay, so we can see now how we've got these stories that do not work together. Okay, so I'm telling you, I'm telling us all that these stories, both stories, are false. Okay, Ruth Payne and Marina are telling us that this weapon was in the garage and Lee took it out during the morning. That is not the truth. There is no weapon. There is no weapon to take. That's the only conclusion that we can make. Frazier is telling us that he saw a weapon in a brown or what was purported to be curtain rods, which was then later assumed to be the weapon, placed on the back seat of a Chevy. Well, that's not the truth either. So both of these accounts rule each other out. Okay, so neither of these accounts are true. Lee, the last time Lee was in that garage was the Thursday night, and he did not take any package of any curtain rods, anything that looked remotely like a brown paper package with a weapon in it. Nothing. He took out of there a black satchel. Okay, now there's another sighting. There's another sighting of Lee Harvey Oswald during the morning, very early. He goes to the Top 10 record store and buys a ticket to Caravan of the Stars. Now, I've discussed this ticket in depth because this ticket is incredibly significant. It's incredibly significant. So what I would do is urge you to go and watch my JD Tippett and Lee Harvey Oswald videos, which I made previously, which talk about why this ticket Caravan of the Stars is incredibly significant. Okay, so we know that happened because we've got an account from the people that work there, Lewis Cortinas and Dub Stark at the Top 10 record store, say that Lee Harvey Oswald came in around 7:15, 7:20 on the Friday morning, and bought this ticket. Well, where is Frazier's account then that they stopped the car outside the Top 10 record street, Jefferson, that area? Lee pops out for 5 minutes, goes to the Top 10 record store and buys a ticket. When have we ever heard Frazier telling us that Lee did that then, if he rode in with him? Never. So we can start to see now that Frazier is not telling us the truth. And we know that Lee went to the Top 10 record store. We know that he bought a ticket to Caravan of the Stars, and he returns later in the morning to buy another ticket to Caravan in the Stars. And as I said before, there's an incredibly important reason why that is the case. And in any case, that happens around 7:15 in the morning, his purchase of this ticket. How's Frazier gonna get from Irving, 12 miles away, to Jefferson, kind of central Dallas, in 10 minutes in the rush hour? The timeline doesn't even work. And we can know that Lee Harvey Oswald was not impersonated the morning of the assassination in any regard, just to buy a ticket to Caravan of the Stars and then return later in the morning to buy another one. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the scenario and the story that we have been told by Wesley Frazier does not hold up. When we look at the evidence, when we look at the other accounts, when we look at other people's testimonies, and when we look at it as a whole, we can see now that Frazier's account falls apart. And I just want to challenge us to really think about some of these issues, because they are very, very important, because it leads us on to the question about why then have we got a narrative that means that we've got to have Lee coming into the building with that curtain rod package. Why have we got to have that? why is that so important? And the only conclusion that we can make from this is that Frazier is feeding the narrative. He's feeding the narrative because he's been instructed to do so, because we've got to find a credible way of explaining how the weapon got into the building. Okay, and that is the only reason. Nobody saw Lee Harvey Oswald enter the school book depository that Friday morning with a package under his arm. Nobody. There is no account of anybody. Okay, so we've only got Frazier's word for it, and I believe, I'm going to come out and say it, I believe he has lied to us. And he has lied to us because he's upholding the narrative. Now, if that's the case, then that is telling us that Wesley Frazier, Lily Mae Randall and Ruth Payne are involved at a deeper level to conspire to set up Lee Harvey Oswald as the killer of President Kennedy. Now, that's extremely important, okay, because when we start to think about it in these terms, we've expanded the conspiracy and we are pulling it out this way. It's not just about Lee Harvey Oswald being a patsy. It's about a whole conglomerate of people coming together, working together, doing the bit that they've been instructed to do on a no questions asked basis, to uphold the narrative. Okay, so really that's what I wanted to bring to us. And you know, come and ask me any questions, and we will talk about this again soon. Okay, so bye for now.